see. Makeup and then also correct. Okay, Seyi, good evening. Hope you can hear me. And I just want to confirm that you're audible. I think you're on mute.
Okay, yes, I
Fantastic.
can. Yeah, good evening. Yes, I can.
All right,
You need the
fantastic. Good.
camera on, right?
Yeah, that would be great. At least if the viewers could see your face.
Okay. All right. Let me enable the camera again.
Okay, so while you are at that, I could just go through the introduction, which is a very good afternoon, morning, evening, from anywhere in the world that you're joining. Welcome to today's webinar. And, today's discussion promises to be insightful, impactful, helping, all of us navigate the maze of entrepreneurship in Africa. There is a very old African saying that says, this is more Nigerian, follow who know road, which is very important because the road here, it's a tough road to navigate. And we hope that by doing this and by learning from each other, we can make our journeys and our travels to be easier. All right. So today's guest is, I think, one of the few people that I follow because there are a lot of people that provide a lot of content and a lot of information, but he might not know this. We met probably about 15 years ago. There was a small group. Yeah, there was a small group that was set up sometime. I think that was when you were doing work with Central Bank and NIPS when they were trying to set up something. And I happened to be in that room. And that was the first time we met. Yourself and your then, I think, co-founder at Digital Encode, you guys came to speak about, cybersecurity. You showed example of the threats and all that. And I was like, wow, these guys are really onto something, right? And that was 15 years ago. So on this journey, we've met a lot of people that, we started a long time ago. And that's the first message, that things don't come easy and quick. You need a lot of time to build. And in building, you meet a lot of people along your journey. And you'd see a lot of builders that are on the same path and the same journey. And you say, I met this guy, 20 years ago when he was trying to do this, but I was trying to do this. So he's not new to me, although he would not remember that we met at that time. But I followed his progress and the progress of his companies and technologies over this time. And I'm really impressed and fascinated by what they are doing. So on today's show, we have Dr. Oluseyi Akindeinde. He's the founder of Hyperspace Technologies and Neural AI. I wonder how you are doing two at the same time. One is enough. One is enough headache for me. So Hyperspace Technologies is focused on Web3, blockchain, AI. Specializing in technologies that aid companies in the fourth industrial revolution. That's not easy. So businesses, can effectively harness the power of true power with technology using their solutions and their consultancy. The second company, which is Neural AI, which is very interesting to me, is essentially providing support for organizations to deploy large language models and generative AI products on premise. They have two key products, the BionicBox and then the Reactor, which you can Google, but it's really, really, really amazing stuff. So over the next 60 minutes thereabouts, we'll be picking Seyi's brain on how this journey has been. And this is particularly interesting because of the amazing work that he has done in terms of the patents he owns, the products he has built, the company he has built. And I know this must have been a nightmare. But we shouldn't go to the grave with what we've learned. I think the key missing bit in Africa is that we don't document what successes and failure. Therefore, it doesn't allow people to learn from it and become better. And we want to try to change that narrative in this generation where we talk. We talk about everything that is going on. We talk about what works, what doesn't work, the journey we've been, so that the people that will come after us and going with us will be better. So, Seyi, you are more than welcome today. I'm so glad to have you, on the show. I think you can unmute. Yes. So let's start up
Yeah,
the
thank you.
conversation.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot for that. For that. Wow, that's 15 years ago. Interesting. Very, very
Yes.
interesting.
And
Very,
I
very
remember so
interesting.
clearly in that room
Very,
because
very
that day
interesting.
I said, wow, these guys are really doing what no one else is doing. And we were still a bit, I'll say, young then. And to be able to think about that at that time, that this will be, a big concern, a big issue, and a big gap. And you guys were closing the gap then. Even then, I was like, this is amazing. Because then, I would say technology in terms of banking, infrastructure, transfers and all that it was in an early stage. There wasn't even the interbank settlement system at that point. There was still T+2 and all those kind of things. And to be able to think about that at that time, I was really, really super impressed. So the first question comes from, I think your initial background was in civil engineering, University of Lagos. And then from civil engineering, you decided, no, this is not my calling, right? And then you moved over to cybersecurity, AI, blockchain, and now you have 4 patents in all that. So at what point, because this is a big question, especially for the young people, I am studying this, or my parents has made me study this, or JAMB has given me this. How do you find and realize your calling or your passion? And how was that for you? When did you know, and how did you know that this is where you should be?
Great opening question, and I like these kinds of storytelling kind of questions where one can trace back to how it all started. And to be very honest with you, at the time I got into even university, to be perfectly honest, I actually didn't even know what I wanted to do, but one of the things I realized back in the day was our parents had some kind of vision. They had an idea for what they felt their kids or their children would be. Of course, part of it is also to serve their own egos as well. So it was more like at the time I was in secondary school, I was a science student. Okay, you do mathematics, you do physics, chemistry, and all that. And then by the time you're getting into university, in my own time then, back when I was in secondary school, there were probably only three major courses that parents wanted their children to read in school, which was engineering, law, and medicine. So my parents were like, well, it would be nice for you to be an engineer, even up to the day my mom still calls me, engineer, that kind of thing, So I went into university doing that. But I realized that number one, I wasn't while my secondary school was fairly okay, I was good. But when I got into university, I realized that I wasn't a book smart person. I wasn't the kind of person that I was good in things that had to do with creativity, in thinking, even within engineering, anything that had to do with, anything, creativity, application of, knowledge. I was very good. But when it came to this strict, logic, go step by step. I wasn't very good in it. So at some point, I wasn't doing very well in school, and it became a bit of a bother. But I was trudging along. I met with a few people. I became roommates with one of the very best students in the entire faculty at the time. He actually came out with the first class, and then he was my age mate, but he mentored me. We became friends, and then I trudged along in engineering, and I was just going on. But something shifted in my fourth year. In engineering, we had to go and do industrial attachments. And then I went into, my mom had this friend who had this engineering company. It was a small engineering firm. And I went in, there was a design, and it wasn't a construction company, it was more of, the office design and drawing company. And I got there. And when I got there, I think that was what changed in me. There was something I saw there. Number one, I saw that they were using computers. That was the first time I'd seen computers. But in Nigerian schools back in the days, you're doing computer science and you may never even see computer all through the 4 or 5 years that you'll be there. Even the people that were writing programs there, they were writing by hand. You were writing your programming by hand, and then you would also mark it by hand. So it was when I got there, I saw that they were using computers. So they were doing a lot of drawings, the things that we're using manual labor to do, all the calculations, you just sit down, put it in the software will analyze and do for you. And I felt, wow, this is actually very nice. It made work easy. And then, there was one young guy then that the company, this was, I'm telling you about 1999. So at that time, computers were very expensive. These big HP computers were very. So what the company used to do, that company I did my IT in, what they used to do was they had some guy who will put the computer parts together. Go and buy the motherboard, put it together, and then supply the company. But a young guy, the guy who at the time couldn't have been more than maybe 20 something. So this guy will come and then he would assemble this and I will watch him. And to me, it felt like magic. It felt like you were watching an assembly plant, putting things together. So I saw this and I felt in my mind, this is what I wanted to do. Then secondly, I also saw that at the time they also had this big plotter and then they wanted to network all the computers together so that when you printed the draw, you had one big plotter, so you couldn't connect it to everybody's computer. Anyway, so you had to connect it to the network, configure all the computers to join the network, talk to themselves, so that when you send print job from one computer, it would send to the. So everything was just fascinating to me, and I was like, wow, I love this. So what I did was I told the guy that, look, the next time you're going to put this thing together, you're going to the market, you want to buy this thing, please, I want to tag along. I just want to go with you. I just want to see the process, to know what you are buying. And then when you are assembling it, I want to sit beside you. And then what you do is install the OS. And this was where the journey started. So that was where I began to have this affinity for computers. The other thing that happened was at the same time that in 1999 was the dawn of the internet. So we were having internet. Like it wasn't very popular because that company also had 1 hour dial-up connection to the internet at the time. So they had an email, address that was given to them by an ISP. So every lunch break between 2 and 3, they would, dial up, pull the mails, down from, and then they had foreign partners, and then so I saw this, and then I was able to connect to the internet while the mail was being put, and I told myself that, which is where I learned something. I learned something called time traveling. I'm a very big fan of Elon Musk, and I see that what he does a lot is instead of waiting for things to happen, what he does is he travels into the future, lives in that future, then comes back to the present and builds that future from that present. I realized this later, but back then I didn't know it was called. I didn't know anything about time traveling. But when I saw the internet, in my own mind, even though there was no way I could, express it, I knew that there was going to be a fundamental shift in the way things would be done. Computers with the internet, it was going to be a game changer for so many things. So in my final year, when I went back to school, I now knew what I wanted to do. So in my final, in fact, the engineers I was working with at the time when I did my IT, they wanted to convince me that no, this thing is just normal, it's just communication, there was nothing to it, it's just email, pull it. They didn't see what I was seeing, that there was a whole lot, because I had seen the guy who was building the computers, I had seen him build the network, I had seen the internet, and because I had access to the internet, whereas they were using it to just pull emails at the time, I was opening a browser and I was actually reading, things on the internet. I was reading a lot of news about, in fact, maybe by now, maybe by now, I probably would have been a multi-billionaire, because I knew that if I had bought shares in Google and those companies that were coming up at the time,
at that time,
but there was no way to buy shares. It was, you imagine shares in 1999 going for maybe $1, $2. And maybe almost $20-something thousand now. So, but at that time, people didn't see it. In fact, it took even my parents were, they were a bit skeptical that, look, engineering was the way. This was time tested. Everybody knew that when you read engineering, you will find work in oil company, you will find work in banks, you will find work. There was literally nowhere you couldn't fit into. So it was almost like just be traditional. So at the end of the day, I got my mom. Thankfully, she was able to buy me a computer, my own computer. So I went to the market, I assembled it as well. And then this was when I knew that this path I was going to.
This is my calling.
This is my calling. So it was accidental calling. It wasn't that I knew what I wanted to do. I saw it. And another thing that shifted my mind a bit was, now, when I went to do my industrial training, the engineers at the time, engineering, accounting, law, they are all professional courses. So for you to rise through the ranks and become, it's almost like you would have to be like 50 something years old, 60 something years before you,
So they were
and
all
then it was
time
professional. You
based.
had to
Yeah.
go through Nigeria Society of Engineers, you had to be registered with current. And then I now saw that in that place, the most well-paid engineer, the highest paid engineer at the time, number one, was nearing, I think was like in his mid 40s, nearing 50s. And then the amount he was getting paid at the time was around about 40,000, 45,000. Meanwhile, this young guy that was building these computers and doing this network, there was a time that plotter we were using had an issue. I think it had a software upgrade issue. So every time they tried to print it. So the guy came to fix it. He just opened it up, he did some cleaning of the cartridges, ran the software. That time we used to have drivers for printer. I think he updated the
I
drivers,
remember that.
he put it, and then this guy collected 12,500 for like a 2-hour job. I saw that. Okay, so these are engineers here. They will work. 1 month, he gets paid 40,000. This guy came 2 hours, he got paid 12,500. I said, Honori, this is rules here that I must follow. So it was a mixture of the technology and the fact that I knew that I could literally become a bit richer faster, with technology, and that was how the journey started.
This is absolutely interesting because what we do is to try to more or less distill the key points from the conversation, after every point. And I hear a couple of things that, also resound with me. The first one is association, right? So you spoke about the roommates that change your mindset, around a couple of things, hard work, diligence and all that. Those are important ingredients that you must have. Then there's the other key component of exposure. We always say that the worst thing or the best thing you can do to a boy in the village is to take him from that village, take him to a city, let him be exposed to what is possible, and then bring him back to that village. He can never stay in that village anymore. Right.
Absolutely.
And that's what exposure does to you. So there is that association, there is the exposure. Then the last bit is the vision part of it, your ability to see. Right. And this is very key. I was having a conversation with a couple of people yesterday, and I said, I'll use an example. When, as you mentioned, time travel, when I see things, immediately I time travel to the possibility of what I've just seen and then see what it can be like and then come back to it. That's another very important component, especially if you are going to be in the innovation space. You need to be able to see 10 years, 15 years of what is possible with that technology, because this is what, where you are bringing that to. So, absolutely spot on. The next question is around, I would say, the easy path and the difficult path. So, to be a number two in a company is much easier than to be a number one. Number one, you take all the risk, you carry all the headache, you have eventual accountability for everything. And in your journey, you've had the opportunity of, co-founding, for instance, Digital Encode, where you were a CTO, and then it became a very successful company. Anyone, or I would say normal people, would be like, okay, this is where my bus stop stops. I can be okay. We can manage this company. But you still felt a need to move beyond this and, go forward in it, knowing that the African startup space is very brutal and it's not forgiving. So it's really around, what's what was the thought process around, I need to push this further? And also, how did you think about leaving comfort for the unknown?
Okay, so sometimes maybe because of the background that I have, there's this saying that they say ignorance is bliss, because if you actually know the end from the beginning, you may not embark on the journey. So most times, I believe that sometimes you even learn in the journey. So when the first company I ran was off the back of learning what I just said in the beginning. So I started learning computer. I didn't at the time. It wasn't in when the first company I ran. It wasn't very popular at all for somebody to start up a company. It was more like that time, you have to also remember that around, okay, when I came back to school was 2000, I finished. So it was 2000, 2001, 2002 that we started having telcos. This was when all these MTN, at the time was Econet, all these things, they started. And every engineer, everybody, in fact, everybody wanted to work, in there. And then also around 2005 was when the bank started coming, when Soludo, transitioned the banks
Yeah.
into the bank. So everybody wanted to work either in the bank, in oil company, or in telco. So it was very unpopular to say you were starting a business. So we didn't used to call it business then. We didn't used to say, oh, it was more like a private practice, or more like hustle. Like, oh, I'm on, like when they ask you what you're doing, you say, oh, I'm on my own. That was what was reigning at the time. It wasn't like, oh, you're starting a startup. So it was easy because I already knew the path. I already saw what I wanted to do. So the company that I first started was AlphaNet, and that AlphaNet was in the business of putting together computers for people and then putting it on network. And I was also very lucky that when I got back to school in my final year in year 2000, because I am the kind of person, like you said, now that I'm on LinkedIn. I post on LinkedIn almost every day. When I know something, you must know that I know it. There's a way I like when I know something, I always find a way to, because I don't know who that maybe you might not even need that service now. You may not even be the end beneficiary of that service, but you may know somebody who will say, Michael, do you know somebody that can? Then you remember that Seyi told you he can. Then you link us up. So when I got back to Unilag, for my final year in 2000, I just went on and told all my friends that, Omo, if you want to buy computer, if you want to build computer, if you want to do, I'm your plug, I'm your this, I'm your that. And then because I also saw the internet, I knew that it was going to be big. So way before cyber cafes became popular, I partnered with my friend. Remember that my mom had bought me a
Yeah.
computer. So I told him that, look, we could actually set up a small cyber cafe in the Department of Civil Engineering, and then students will come. So we leveraged the student market, and at the time, it now became very popular for people to come and type their final year projects on the computer instead of going to typewriter and all those kinds of things. So those were the initial forays. And so because I told that my friend, that one of my friends, his name is Rotimi, he now came and he said, this kind of cyber cafe that he told his dad, and that his dad wants to set up something like that in Magodo, but way bigger than the one we had. I said I must be the one that will do it. So it took me, I met his dad, and the dad wanted to set it up, but the man took one look at me. If you think, I mean, most people see me now, big and young. He had took one look at me, and that time I'm talking about maybe a project that was worth maybe like 2 or 3 million naira. This was way back. This was when one computer was like maybe 50,000, or and he said, if I give this boy 2 million naira, even though his son, yeah, he said we're in class together and all that, and his son is also a very good business guy, that he will manage me and all that. The man said no, that I had to go and bring a guarantor. So I went and I told my mom, but my mom didn't want to. And no, 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 you can't do this. But eventually she went with me to be a guarantor, and I got the project. And it was a very big project. It was really a very big project. And that was more like what put me in good stead for business. There, from that point on, as a young person, this was 20, it was year 2000. Imagine getting a 2M project, cash. It was raw cash, that I got. So I knew that this path was going to be, the path. So after building the cyber cafe for the man, that my friends, that he now said, oh, he actually wanted he wanted me to give him people that would manage it for him, So I got him people. So it was there I cut my teeth in business. So after that, now, funny thing, immediately after that, once we graduated from school, that was when the reality dawned that, okay, when you are in school, school is a bit of an exaggerated market, because you already have customers in the form of students that you could easily market to, print flyers. But after school now, nothing, everything just dried up. Nothing was coming in, nothing was going on. So I said, this was the time to, rebuild myself. So what I now did was, I knew that at the point I couldn't the cyber cafe business, the whole, I said, I now, again, coming back to the time travel, I said, okay, so in the next 5 years, 10 years from now, what will happen in technology? And remember, this was very early days of the internet. So that was when I said, okay, well, we needed to start providing services for other companies. So we now moved into software as opposed to hardware. So that was when we started doing things like open source. That's where we founded, I founded the Inverse Information Systems. And it was there, we started that. That was the first time I met with my now former partner in digital and code, and then it was after we met that we now looked again, time traveled to look at what next. It was information security, because by the time you bring all this software together, you bring all these networks together, you bring all and at the time, there was no security. So, and like you said, all those days, there was no NIBs. Even in 2000, when the first, card schemes came, it was magnetic stripe. So there was a lot of fraud. There was a lot of, cybersecurity issues. There so many of them, and nobody was addressing it. So that was why we said, okay, this cybersecurity market looks like, the next thing. And then we got into cybersecurity. So you can see the evolution. Because the technology itself is not static. And think about it, if you actually look at global corporations as well, pick any company, Microsoft, Google, Meta, all of these companies, if you check what they started with and what they are doing now, because you can't tell me Microsoft started as a pure software company, but you can, in between, they moved into cloud. In between, they started doing, commercial software. In between, they started doing cybersecurity. In between, they're doing AI. The same thing, Meta started as purely Facebook, social media.
The social
Before
media.
they bought Instagram, they bought WhatsApp, they are doing this VR, they are doing the same thing Google, because you cannot stay still in technology. You constantly have to, adapt. So that was what we didn't know the name for it at the time. That you could actually, adapt and pivot. But we just knew that as time was going on, you have to adapt to what is, currently happening. And that was what. And I by nature, you see, when I was in digital and code was a consulting company. It was a professional services company. And see, the thing with consulting companies is that innovation is a bit hard, because you are working within the spectrum,
within the confines of the
So
client.
Within the confines of the client, you are implementing standards and procedure, time-tested standard. Don't go out of it. We've already thought of everything. So let's say you want to implement, say, a PCI DSS standard or an ISO standard. The standard is there. You cannot think outside the box. Just follow the standard, make sure everything. So even if you have an idea to say, oh, why are we doing it like this? Why can't we? You can't really implement that idea. You just have to say, look, this is what we are implementing, and that is your remit. So I found that a bit too choky. Like, I couldn't really express. Yes, there was room for the side of cybersecurity I was in was offensive security. But it wasn't the kind of things that you could say, you could innovate. Actually, you couldn't really do that much of innovation. So it was then I just realized that, okay, I needed to redefine myself yet again. So around 2015, 2016, I started learning something about blockchain technology. Okay, I'm sure you probably still come to that.
Yes, definitely.
And then from there, picked it up, got into when AI came, and that is how, and over time, and then you see, I always would like to tell people as well that at some point, you will break through when you start to run a business. You may not know when you will break through. So when you're in it, so for the first 10 years, when we started the company, we didn't even have any office. There was no office. We were basically just two guys who had something to offer. And you would need someone to take a chance on you. You will need, and what we prided ourselves on was the intellectual capability. So we knew that even if you had a problem, like even if you didn't want to see us and you have one problem and they are telling you that these guys are the only guys that can solve that problem, you will be hard pressed to not to use the person. So the analogy I always use is, I don't know if this is urban legend or not, that there was this particular Arab sheikh who was ill, very ill. I had one kind of chronic disease, and they took him to a hospital. And the way he was, and then he saw the doctor in dreads, in tattoo, and he said, I can't allow this doctor operate on you, blah blah. And he didn't allow. He was flown back. And then 2 years later, the thing came back again. And they took him to, they said, is this doctor? Eventually, if they looked around the world, there was nobody that could cure him unless that guy did. And eventually just said, okay, they gave him all these analgesics and he slept off and they operated him. And by the time he woke up, everything, he was well and all that. Guess what? He looked at the doctor. In fact, it was the one that I think he gave the doctor his first maybe BMW or something. So what am I driving at? That look, if you build capacity, if you build knowledge, you cannot be waved aside, no matter how. And then number two, if you are a problem solver, if you focus on problem solving, like you wake up, you're thinking about how to solve problems. One day, somebody will call you that has, a problem that they need to solve.
Mm-hmm.
So we focused on those two things, building capacity and then problem solving. So much so that there was a day in one of these, hustle moments, a bank's network went down. Now, at the time, remember I told you that we moved into open source after, the initial IT thing we got into.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And their entire backend was implemented on the Linux operating system by some foreign guys, I think from South Africa, but they had left. So this day, the server just went down. This was back in the day when people didn't really have the DR centers, disaster recovery, backup, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So the server couldn't come up, and it was Linux. And they looked around and who was the Linux person that they could come to revive this, servers. I think it was having they didn't even know whether it was a hard disk problem or it was, a hardware problem or something. And it was some guy in that company who said, look, I know some guys.
I know some guys.
I know some guys who, they may not be your big four type people, but I know that if they come here now, guess what? The end said, look, just get this thing fixed. That was the instruction. In fact, the day they called, I think it was in the evening. In fact, the day we went to the bank, I think I was even wearing shorts and slippers or something, because it wasn't something that they were looking at these young guys like this. But because I had seen that problem before, I knew that it was a memory problem. So it was they're having, when you have bad memory on Linux, and then the thing wouldn't. So I just told them when I just came in, I booted it up to safe mode, and I just said, can we get a spare memory there?
Memory card.
Yeah. And just opened it, put the memory in, and the thing came up, and the thing started working. And guess what? That was a breakthrough moment. That it was such that's why most times when we're doing business and you see people write business plan and put figures and try to match. You see, business is an art, is more art than science. Is more of, you can't yes, there's a bit that you need to plan, but there's just some things that just by the virtue of the fact that you're doing it, you will come, and you would not even know when it will come. That's why when you ask any successful businessman, any successful entrepreneur, whether it's Dangote, and you ask them, sir, what exactly did you do that made you a billionaire? They would not tell. They would just tell you it's a series of so many things that would lead to so many things that will connect to so many things. And before you know it, you wake up one day and you see that I don't blow, that kind of thing. So, and that's how the whole thing started.
So interesting. But as I said, at the end, when young people sit down with elders, in those days, elders would tell you stories. But the aim of those stories is for you to get the message and for you to get, the lens to look at things from. And that's what we try to do here after the conversations. So I would say, from this conversation, first lens is you really have to be adaptable based on, what's going on, where the world is going to. Things are going to change fast. You need to be comfortable with uncertainty. I think that's the key that kills most people. They always like certainty in things. When I'm going out, I need to know exactly. No, you only need to know probably the next few yards. You figure everything out as you go. Then you mentioned the time travel, go forward. But when I tell people that, they only see the finished product now, what they see, but they don't know the story behind it. Like you, my first company, I was 16 years old. It
Mm,
wasn't even in tech in the
mm.
first thing. But it has been a journey, and you need to embrace that journey. Be adaptable, ensure that you embrace uncertainty and know how to manage it. Um, as you said, focus on problems that are deep enough that people will look for anyone to solve it. I don't think there's anyone that will have a headache and want to keep his money and still keep the headache. No, you would let go of the money immediately for the headache. So if you focus on the problems, definitely you will do so. Which leads to the next question, um, around for I think one of the biggest challenges of Africa and all that is the brain drain in terms of those that are really good have built up that intellectual capacity. They often find themselves in new societies where they really contribute to those societies. So you'd see a lot of, if I use Nigerians, for instance, in medicine, all over the world, doing fantastic. But look at the medical system back home. So you would have easily been in any of the top giants. You could have been in Google, Microsoft, Amazon. In fact, you would top their charts in it. But you are here, like me. So the question is, what keeps us here, and why do we believe that our calling is to make a contribution here, rather than finding individual success in already established climes?
Uh, Great question. I have always believed in um, being, the way I see it is what exactly, yes, as good as one may be, I don't think my impact, if I was in the US or Europe, would be as much as if I was here. You just said something in your introduction that you met me 15 years ago. 15 years ago, I was probably still in my maybe late 20s with,
We were all in that range.
exactly, um, making a presentation to central bank and NIBS on cybersecurity. You see, that is what Africa gives you. I don't think I'll be in the US and I'll know about cybersecurity and I'll be making a presentation to the Federal Reserve on cybersecurity as a black man. I don't think so, because there's so many more people. Or I'll be in the UK and I'll be making, at that age, making a top-notch presentation. And in fact, you are right, because after that presentation, was it after or before that, or maybe it was during that presentation, Central Bank of Nigeria signed up our company as technical partners to the electronic, they set up a committee called the CBN Electronic Fraud Forum, where they were investigating all cybersecurity cases. I don't think it would have happened in another country. And
That was
that
during
is
the time of Tunde Lemo, I think.
yes, yes,
Yes,
I think
yes, I
so.
remember. Yes.
So that is the difference you can make when you have knowledge and you practice it here. It's easy. Like I always say, one of our clients used to tell us that, look, in Nigeria, you only, now abroad, if you want to shine, you need maybe halogen lamp, a very strong halogen lamp to shine for people to see your brightness. But in Nigeria, you can shine with that lamp, because you see the barrier is low. That's why it's easy if you have substance, if you have knowledge. It's easy here. I just told you I walked into a bank in shorts,
Mhm.
and they allowed me, fiddle with their servers, and I became a superstar. I don't think it will happen like that in any other place. So I am of the opinion that if you want to really shine, even if you spent a long time abroad, you should still come back home and come to, and if you see it even across the strata, like if you look at our entertainment sector too, a lot of the artists that we know today, they are probably lounging in abroad until they came to
Mhm.
Nigeria, before, like all them, the band, John
Mhm.
Jazzy,
Mhm.
Davido, that's even an American citizen. They had to come back here for people to accept them. Then they now exported it again. So can you see so if they were there is no way you can be competing with the Jay-Z's of this world, with the
Mhm.
Rihanna's of this world. But when you are here, the competition is low, that if you actually have the talent, it's easy for you to quote and unquote blow. So that's why from day one, I had never seen a, foreign country as any plan, because I know that it's easy for me to solve problem and be recognized here than for me to go, there, because number one, that place is already saturated. The competition is already, crazy. It's already, I mean, some of the tools that we are even using here were, brought down from that side. So I can't be competing with somebody there, and it will take time for them to get to know me unless you were extraordinary. So that was why I said, okay, for us here, for me here, we will, build the company. And then secondly, I also think that as Africans, we need to start to build for Africa. We need to start to look inwards. I mean, there's a reason why I passed by I think Equatlantic. The United States is building one of the biggest embassies in
Embassies,
Africa, in
yeah.
Nigeria. There's a reason why they are doing that. They've time traveled. They've seen that this economy, this African economy, this Nigerian economy, in the next 10, 15 years. So if they are coming to build the biggest embassy, some of these schools that were secondary schools, they are coming to establish here. That means that there's something they are seeing.
They are seeing that we're not seeing.
They have access to data. They have access. They are working with data. So it tells me that the market is here. It may not be obvious. It may not be visible. So I said, okay, let us build for it. In fact, we're a Pan-African, company. So we build solutions to solve problems. We are not cutting and pasting solutions from there. We're not going to say, oh, what problem? See, there's a different problem they have in the West that we have here. We are still there's so many things we are battling with here that we need to solve. We're even still battling with data issues, internet penetration, electricity, and all that. So we are looking for solutions. We are building solutions to, and yes, it may be slow. It may be slow at first because, sometimes in Nigeria, the joke I use is, because you want to come and sell cars, you have to be the one to build the road, even though road building is not
it's not your business.
But you have to. And if you ask any successful company in Africa, Nigeria, from InterSwitch to Paystar to Flutterwave, they actually had to do something outside their sphere of influence just so that they can get adoption. In fact, when InterSwitch started as well, the payment system that we all use today, the card and all that, they realized that if you have a card and there's nowhere to use it, there's nowhere. So what they did was they built a portal, an e-commerce portal, which was outside their remit, just so that you'll be able to use your card to buy for, pay for something on there. So that's the way Africa is. But over time, are they reaping the rewards? Of course, they are reaping the rewards today. So if one can be patient to build, I believe that the market is here, and it's only in this market that you can be asymmetrically rewarded. Like the reward for you may start a business 5 years nothing, 6 years nothing, 9 years nothing, and in the 10th year, all the nothingness then becomes something. Just somebody will just see your talent and just say, oh, you've been building this thing, you've been building this thing, you've been doing this, you've been doing that, and you actually have the solution. All of a sudden, within that 1 year, you become a multi, or your business just goes. And again, it boils down to, like you said, is when you're running a business anywhere all over the world. By the way, I was reading something about NVIDIA as well. You see, NVIDIA is the only company that is that has a market cap of $5 trillion as at 2025. But guess what? NVIDIA was started in 1993.
I used to buy their graphic cards then to play games.
Yeah, between 1993 and 2023, they were only a $1 trillion. They made their first trillion in 2020 after 30 years. But guess what? Between 2023 and 2025, they've moved from 1 trillion to 5 trillion. That's 5x in 2 years. But it took them 30 years to even get to that.
Get to 1x.
That's why they always say your first million is going to be the most difficult.
After that, is the hardest one.
So what does that tell us? That we need to stay the course. It's not an overnight thing. It's not some. So when I start startups, I give myself 5 years. I give myself 5 years to say, look, I'm not even looking at raising money. I'm not looking at raise. I'm just looking at building the roads, because for people to use your product, especially when you play in the segment that I play in, which is the business to business market, people need to be comfortable with the product, and we are in a sector now where it hasn't really been I mean, how many Nigerian cybersecurity companies building products do you know? How many Nigerian antivirus companies do you know? How many Nigerian companies implementing not implementing, building?
Firewalls or thing.
Yeah, even building the solution itself. Like, you're actually building, imagine building an antivirus company, building an endpoint detection, and response company, like, building the solution that they're going to use. And that's what we're building in AI. We're actually building a platform for organizations to build, intricate agents that can connect to their data and work with their data. So it takes time for people. It's no longer about the product you're building. It's not about the trust. It's not about the personality. It's not about the people. Which is why a lot of the times, I'm always online posting, doing one of the, because that is what would build trust.
That's the building the trust and building the road also.
Exactly, building the trust, and then you also have to do a lot of capacity building. For each of our clients, the first few weeks we are training their staff. We're putting them through on this is how this thing works. This is how it will work in your environment. So of course, in doing that as well, you are building the trust. You are building and then you are empowering them as well. So it's a give and take, and they trust you. You trust them. So now you can work together. So there's a whole lot. But unfortunately, I think these days a lot of people just want to go right straight to the answer, and
That's
everything
because of
super
the
fast.
narrative that is pushed out. So, people push out a narrative as if um, you're a junior somewhere. You just have one idea overnight. The next 12 months, you're a billionaire, and then you are doing IPO. That's not. Probably it happens, but that's not the norm.
Yeah,
We always say that that's, one in 1 zillion. What you've just
absolutely.
mentioned, this is the process. And you can ask anyone that has gone through this. And we always say that, the who you become through the process is more important than what you get in terms of either financial reward. It's who you are that's
Absolutely.
really important. The key conversation or the key takeaway from this particular point is something that I saw in, I think, the book that Femi Otedola wrote in there. And then there was a phrase that he used there that says, problems and opportunities are actually the same thing. It just depends on, which side you are looking
From.
at it from. Yeah. So they're exactly the same thing. And when we complain about all the problems that we have in Africa, power, someone else will see that as all the opportunities that, he can solve and make something very significant. I think, as you mentioned, time travel. So imagine that you've time traveled, but this time not really time traveled. You've gone to the West and you've
Mm,
seen where they are, and you come back to Africa and you've seen where we are. That's like going back to 1999 with the knowledge I have now. If I'm
yes.
back in 1999 with the knowledge I have now, will I not be the owner of Facebook, Nvidia, and all that? But we see it
Exactly.
and we do nothing with it. I think that's where that gap is, and really, you've really hit the point where this is really what we should be looking at and how people should think about it. Focus on the problem because they are the opportunities, which leads to the next question, which is more kind of personal time management. People, or a lot of people, ask me, how do I get so much done in 24 hours? Because they have the same 24 hours as myself. So if I'm looking at you now, the same 24 hours that we all have, some people cannot even find the time to do anything.
Mm.
In the same 24 hours, you're building 2 companies, you have four patents, you speak at all these events, you are doing all this. What's the magic? How do you buy more hours from somewhere that we don't know? Please tell us.
Well, it just so happens that my work is also my hobby. That is how I'm able to. So my work. So even when I'm not working, I am like a lot of the 4 patents that, in fact, right now we actually have, yes, we've been granted 4, but I think we have another like 6 or 7 that we are still waiting for, approval and all that. So I didn't set out one day to say, oh, I want to, file a patent. It was through, maybe I'm somewhere and I'm doing something, and I'm able to solve a problem. And then I'm like, okay. And then in my spare time, like I said, my work is also my hobby. My work is like when if I sometimes when I'm working, I don't even know. It's like when you ask an average footballer like Cristiano Ronaldo or Messi or these people, to them now it's us that we see that football thing as work. Oh. They see it as joy. In fact, some of them can literally play for free if you because it is part of them. This is all they've known, and that's the same thing with my work. So from the time I got into IT up until this moment I'm speaking to you, my work. So that's why it looks like I have, maybe I'm accomplishing more in these hours because a lot I don't see it as work. So when I have a problem I'm trying to troubleshoot, I spend my time. I might be watching TV, I'm on the computer working as well. I might be doing something else, I'm on the computer working. I'm being productive all the time. And because it's which is why I always tell people that, you see, the way to be successful in life, in anything, is to be consistent. Because when you are consistently doing something, you yourself would not know at the point where you become so good and that thing becomes so natural to you that other people will be looking at you and say, how did you know? So it's the consistency that I have put in over, these 20 something years that, that has now become part and parcel, of one. So that's the secret. It's just being consistent. And then obviously there are nowadays, when we started, there weren't so many things that were time wasters. We didn't have social media, we didn't have a lot of all these, time wasting apps. But these days there's so many things that waste a lot of people's time. There's so many, from one social media app to the other, from one, excuse me, which is why I like talking to students a lot, that look, you guys are going to be the future of this country. And if you're wasting all your time, scrolling, doom scrolling on social media, posting, making things, the time is never going to be enough. Half 90% of them don't. That's why most of them they can't be creative to find solutions to problems. We in our startup, we do a lot of interviews. We interview a lot of young people, in several positions. And one thing is very clear: people are not willing to think. They are not willing to even apply a bit of effort to solve, a problem. Once they meet up with a bottleneck, like, oh, this thing is that they can't, they just can't move past. In fact, my former place, we had someone who started work, and in 3 months, she resigned because she felt, oh, it was too stressful, it was too this, it was too that. I'm like, look, back in the day, I mean, right now, you can use ChatGPT to write a report. Back in the day, you had to structure your report. You had to know how to put objectives, aims, and this thing, the body, the project management. You have to put everything together manually. You have to not only manually, you have to type it manually, correct all the mistakes. But now you can tell ChatGPT, and yet you are still thinking that the work is still too stressful. How are you going to survive? So for me, you have to dedicate your time to, you have to be consistent, and you have to hold forth to that thing you are doing and believe that that thing you're doing is, it has to be a part and parcel of you. That's the only thing I can say. Otherwise, there won't be any once, which is the same thing happening in business, which is why you see people going for this. There's something called the shiny object syndrome. You start one business in software today. Oh, tomorrow you hear, oh, it's hardware that is selling. You move into hardware. Oh, next week, oh, it's cloud computing.
And
You
then
move
they
into
call
cloud
it
computing.
pivot.
Keep pivot, and at the end of the day, you don't have and then of course there's also this I don't know whether it is propaganda. I don't know what should I call it, that is being spread amongst business people. Oh, this thing called multiple streams of income, and then they start to use. Oh, if you look at Femi Otedola, multiple streams. Dangote, multiple streams. But what they do not know is that these people started with one thing. In fact, I put something on
This
my
single
LinkedIn
line.
about 2 or 3 months ago. The advert that Dangote did in the newspaper in 1986.
Yes, I saw it. I saw it.
But people won't know that at that time, look at what he wasn't having multiple screens. He was building his business. He was marketing. He was, but today that he has become Dangote, he can afford to build refinery. He can afford to have oil. He can afford anything. But did he start like that? No. So what you do is the same thing. Look at Elon Musk. He started with, PayPal. Very first, when he cashed out, then he diversified. That's how people, Bill Gates, all these people started with Microsoft, one company, Oracle, go and look at them. They started, even Google started with search before they started going into Android, Pixel, and all these kinds of things. But we sit here and we say, oh, this person in multiple streams. Then you do one thing, you do it halfway, you move to
You
the next
just
thing.
dilute your effort everywhere
Why don't
without
you
impact.
sit and build one, make sure that one is successful, then you can then, spread your tentacles from there. And I think that's what we need to learn in Africa, that we need to see something through. The reason why I believe that we build ephemeral businesses. So, of course, in the US, you can build an app that will remind you to drink water and they will fund you. But in Africa, you cannot build an app that will remind you to drink water and you get funded. If I am convinced that I am solving a real problem, okay, if I'm convinced that I'm solving a real problem, I'll see it, at least I'll give it time. And when you start a business, you have to give it minimum 5 years to see it and make sure you have exhausted all options before you then pivot. Not that you meet with your first bottleneck, your first roadblock, and the next thing is, oh, you're already thinking of pivoting. Yes, sometimes it may happen like that, okay, within the first year, you may find out that, okay, maybe the market isn't even ready, for your product as yet. Okay, then you can pivot. But when you pivot, let it, like I said about InterSwitch, when they came out with their e-payment, the card, yes, they knew that the card would fly, but at the time, it was almost like they were too ready for the market. The market was
Yeah,
not
they're
ready.
too early to the market. Yeah, they're
So what
too
did they
early to the
do?
market.
They built, the road around it. They know that, yes, eventually it's our card we want you to use, but because we know that you cannot use the card without where to, it's a chicken and egg problem. So they built, that, quick teller, and then, okay, now you can uh, send your card here. And guess what? That quick teller itself now became a business on its own right now, but they are still in their card business. So that's how we need to, think in Africa here. So that's how I'm able to have so much time, and to do a lot of
Now
things.
I'm looking at my time and saying, oh my God, we're only 20% through the conversation and we've already
Wow.
burnt through the whole time. That means we need to have a part two of this because these conversations are really, really amazing. So for this session, we'll arrange a new session. I think I'll close with one more because of our viewers and time, so that we don't make it more than 1 hour, which is Bionic Box and Reactor, and what they aim to do. Fundamentally, outside the product and the technology, you have I'll say more or less an economic problem or an infrastructure problem, power, and all that. And that's what you're trying to solve. So really, in conceiving and executing that product, how are you going about that constraint, given that you are in Africa and then you need to build around that?
Good, great question. So that's why when we're thinking about it, we first looked at the market. And just like I had it was the same process we actually used in my former company when we're building the cybersecurity, excuse me, practice, that, okay, cybersecurity was unknown. I mean, people were at the time, they were still concentrating on infrastructure. How do we go about? Do you know that back in the day, it's just like this fable that you always hear, that is the same is the antivirus companies that are writing the viruses so that you can so that they can attack you, and then you buy their, so, and that was their route to market. So sometimes, of course, who's going to buy an antivirus if there are no viruses? So there used to be this, I don't think it's true though. But at the time in Nigeria, the same strategy we used, like, oh, sometimes, this was back in the day, to just, hack a company's website and go and tell them, oh, look, oh, your website has been hacked too, but we can fix it for you. And at least that will get you in the door. So when we're thinking about this, we looked at the market, that, okay, how will customers use AI? And at the time, Nigeria is big on privacy,
Mhm.
cybersecurity, data protection and all that. Not many organizations will want to expose their data. So when we're building this product, we knew that we wanted to build a product that would not be the traditional, chat GPT type of thing, but a kind of chat GPT that will work on the data of our customers so they can leverage it to make decisions. So that's why we felt, okay, this would be better to implement in-house, on premise, because obviously, number one, the data that the AI will be talking to would also be within the confines of
Mm-hmm.
the infrastructure of our customers. So we build out how we built a product, around it. So the Bionic box is something you put on your network, or even if you have a cloud infrastructure, you put in there and then it connects your data. It's a physical device. Then we moved to because we now realize that for physical devices, it was a bit difficult because we need to get the device, we need to move it to the data center and all that. We did that for a bit, and we saw that, okay, I think what we need is to actually build it in software. So we actually built, a platform, an AI platform, which is the Reactor. Reactor is simply an AI that does it reasons and it acts, and then it observes. That's why you see the name Reactor. It reasons and then it acts. But because React is already like a programming framework,
Mm-hmm.
we just made it, Reactor. So it's just an agent building platform that allows, a company to build agents that will not just interact with their data, that is able to perform actions on their data. So because I have the cybersecurity background, I know that some of the challenges are facing in cybersecurity is, let's say, something like Security Operations Center now. See, there's too much data coming in, such that the people managing this data are not able to make decisions of this data because it's relentless. So we're saying, okay, if you have an AI agent that you can plug into, this data, then the AI agent can actually act on this data as well, and then, you can derive intelligence from it. So it cuts across cybersecurity, business intelligence, any kind of industry where, in fact, we have a client now that is using it for things like, predictive analytics of their business, knowing how to route inventory, knowing how to, stratify customers and all those kinds of things, all using natural language. You don't have to be a programmer. You don't. So even a C-level exec can sit down, and just ask, how much did I make across my enterprise today? What were people asking for? What is, and in natural language, the AI would, because it's connected to your data that is sitting within your infrastructure, the system is also within your infrastructure, you are able to derive, a lot of intelligence from it. So that was our, concept when we were building for this product.
Now, excellent. I need to have a part two of this. I cannot let you go, and then we'll have a part two of this definitely, because these conversations are gold. But we're out of time now,
Mm.
at least for the viewers. We'll set up in another one to take probably the next 40%, then a third one to take the last 40%. So it's been it's been amazing, talking with you, Seyi. I think you're one of the people laying the path that will define this continent, in the future. And the key message is, you know, time travel.
Yeah.
Be open to explore. Be comfortable with uncertainty. Research your market very well, and then opportunities and problem are the same sides, of the same coin. It just depends on how you look at it. Africa has
Absolutely.
enough problems to keep enough entrepreneurs busy. Focus and ensure that you become a specialist in the problem area that you've chosen, and definitely time will reward you. As you've said, give it 5 to 7 years, build it, be focused, and then definitely you will succeed. So thank you very much, Shay, for joining us tonight. To set up a follow-up, definitely, and then we'll keep these conversations open. And to everyone listening, thank you for joining in. We'll share this. I think there are a lot of lessons here for all of us to learn, and for those that will come after us to make their lives better. All right. Thank you very much, and everyone have a good night.
Thank you very much for having me. Good night.
Thank you, Shay.
Yeah.
All right. Good night.